Chosen one, your payment confirmed, bank decision final. There are moments when language uses familiar symbols to describe something much deeper than the surface meaning. When you hear the words payment confirmed and decision final, the mind immediately thinks of money, banks, and transactions. But this message is not about a receipt, a loan, or an external institution approving your worth. It is about confirmation at a different level. It is about a cycle closing, an agreement being honored, and a process reaching a point where reversal is no longer necessary. Chosen one, your payment confirmed does not mean something suddenly appears without effort. It means something you have already invested in, through patience, endurance, restraint, and growth, has reached the stage where acknowledgement is inevitable. The decision being final does not remove your responsibility. It confirms that what you carried quietly has been registered. Stay with this message until the end, because clarity unfolds in layers, and rushing through it weakens its impact. And write your warmest wishes in the comments and include the number 144 as a conscious act of intention and energetic alignment. This moment is about recognizing when effort meets timing, when persistence meets response, and when what was delayed begins to move. This is the only place where wishes are spoken, because from here on, the focus shifts fully to understanding what confirmation truly means and how to stand steady when it arrives. Now, chosen one, press the hype button like this video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and let's start. Confirmation often comes silently. There is rarely an announcement, applause, or immediate proof. Most people miss it because they expect noise. They look for visible signs instead of internal shifts. But confirmation is felt before it is seen. It shows up as calm replacing anxiety, as certainty replacing doubt, as a quiet knowing that something is no longer pending. When a decision is final at a deeper level, it means the internal debate has ended. You stop asking whether you deserve progress. You stop questioning whether the wait was wasted. You stop negotiating with yourself about whether to continue. That internal approval is what changes everything. Chosen ones often struggle most right before confirmation because the final stretch demands trust without reassurance. This is where many people quit, not because they lack strength, but because uncertainty becomes uncomfortable. The mind wants guarantees. It wants timelines. It wants proof before movement. But confirmation does not arrive to convince you to move. It arrives because you already did. Every boundary you held, every moment you chose integrity over ease, every time you continued without recognition, those were deposits. You may not have labeled them that way at the time, but they counted. A final decision does not mean nothing can change. It means the direction has been set. The path may still adjust, but the outcome is no longer fragile. This is important to understand because many people sabotage themselves after confirmation by testing it unnecessarily. They doubt the calm. They question the stability. They create problems to feel familiar tension again. But confirmation often feels quiet, even anticlimactic. It doesn't rush. It settles. When something is truly confirmed, you no longer need to chase it. Effort becomes cleaner. You are not forcing outcomes. You are cooperating with them. This is where discernment becomes critical. Not every opportunity that appears after confirmation is meant to be taken. Some are distractions that test whether you trust what has already been decided. When the decision is final, impatience is no longer required. You can move deliberately instead of reactively. Many chosen ones misinterpret delay as denial. They assume that because something took time, it must not be meant for them. But delay is often protection. It builds capacity. It strengthens character. It removes attachments that would have corrupted the outcome if it arrived too soon. When confirmation comes, it often arrives alongside readiness. You are different than you were when you first wanted the result. That difference matters. There is also a responsibility that comes with confirmation. When you are no longer waiting, you can no longer hide behind uncertainty. Clarity removes excuses. You are asked to show up consistently, not occasionally. This is where discipline replaces motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline sustains. A final decision is not an ending. It is a beginning that requires stewardship. You may notice that after confirmation, your tolerance for chaos decreases. Situations that once felt acceptable now feel misaligned. Conversations feel clearer. Boundaries feel necessary rather than optional. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. When you know where you are going, detours lose their appeal. You stop proving. You stop explaining. You start moving. Another sign of true confirmation is emotional stability. This does not mean constant happiness. It means reactions soften. Highs are less frantic. Lows are less consuming. You trust yourself to handle what comes next because you have already handled what came before. Confidence becomes internal rather than dependent on feedback. It is important not to romanticize confirmation. It does not remove effort. It refines it. You still work, but you no longer work in confusion. You still wait at times, but you no longer wait in fear. You understand that some processes unfold in stages, and you respect those stages instead of resisting them. Chosen ones often carry a deep fear of disappointment. They hesitate to accept confirmation because they are afraid of losing it. But what is truly confirmed cannot be taken away by doubt. It can only be delayed by resistance. Acceptance is not arrogance. Acceptance is alignment with reality as it is now, not as it was before. When the decision is final, comparison loses relevance. You stop measuring your progress against others because your path has its own rhythm. You recognize that what is meant for you does not require competition. It requires consistency. This understanding brings relief. You breathe differently. You move differently. You think differently. As this first part closes, understand this clearly. Confirmation does not mean you are finished. It means you are cleared to proceed. The waiting season taught you how to stand. The confirmation season teaches you how to move. What comes next will require presence, honesty, and responsibility, but not desperation. The pressure has shifted. What once felt uncertain now feels anchored. And from that anchoring, real progress begins. After confirmation, the most important shift happens internally, not externally. The world may look the same at first, but your relationship with it has changed. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are moving from a place of having been acknowledged. This distinction is subtle, but powerful. Waiting creates tension. Confirmation creates grounding. When something is truly settled, urgency dissolves. You no longer feel the need to rush, prove, or overextend yourself. Your actions slow down. Not because you lack momentum, but because momentum is now stable. Many chosen ones feel disoriented after confirmation because they spent so long in preparation mode. Struggle became familiar. Anticipation became routine. When that tension lifts, there can be a strange emptiness. This is normal. It is the space where a new way of operating must be learned. You are no longer driven by lack. You are guided by alignment. This requires a different kind of discipline. Instead of pushing through resistance, you learn to listen for precision. Instead of doing more, you learn to do what matters. Confirmation also exposes habits that were useful in survival mode, but unnecessary in stability. Overthinking, over-explaining, constantly scanning for threats or rejection. These patterns once protected you, but now they drain you. Letting them go can feel uncomfortable, even risky, because they were tied to your sense of safety. But safety built on fear is not safety at all. True stability comes from trust. Trust in your judgment, your timing, and your ability to adapt. A final decision does not eliminate challenges. It changes their nature. Challenges become strategic rather than emotional. Problems are solved instead of endured. You stop personalizing obstacles and start interpreting them. This shift is critical. When you take things less personally, you conserve energy. When you conserve energy, you move with clarity. This is how progress becomes sustainable. Another adjustment that follows confirmation is the refinement of focus. Not everything deserves your attention anymore. You become selective without becoming rigid. You understand that attention is a form of currency, and you no longer spend it on what does not contribute to your direction. This may feel isolating at first. Fewer conversations, fewer distractions, but what remains is deeper, cleaner, and more aligned. Chosen ones often worry that slowing down after confirmation means losing momentum. In reality, it means momentum has internalized. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are building structure. Structure supports growth over time. Without it, even the best opportunities collapse under inconsistency. This is why patience becomes essential at this stage. Not passive patience, but intentional pacing. You may notice a shift in how you respond to validation. Praise feels pleasant, but unnecessary. Criticism feels informative, but not destabilizing. Your sense of worth is no longer negotiated moment to moment. This emotional independence is one of the clearest signs that confirmation has taken root. You are no longer outsourcing your confidence. There is also a deeper responsibility that comes with confirmation: stewardship. What has been acknowledged must be handled with care. This includes your time, your energy, your words, and your decisions. You are not asked to be perfect, but you are asked to be consistent. Consistency builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. And self-trust is what allows long-term vision to survive short-term discomfort. At this stage, temptation often appears in subtle forms. Shortcuts, familiar distractions, opportunities that promise quick satisfaction at the cost of alignment. These tests are not punishments. They are confirmations of confirmation. They reveal whether you trust the process enough to stay the course. Saying no becomes as important as saying yes. You may also notice that some people respond differently to you now. Some feel inspired. Others feel uncomfortable. This is not because you changed who you are at your core, but because you are no longer adjusting yourself to maintain balance around others. You are balanced within yourself. That shift is noticeable. Let reactions be information, not instruction. Another key lesson during this phase is restraint. Not everything needs to be acted on immediately. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Power often lies in timing. When the decision is final, silence becomes a tool rather than a void. You learn when to move and when to wait, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Confirmation also brings clarity around values. You become less willing to compromise on what matters most. This can feel confrontational, but It is actually simplifying. Clear values reduce decision fatigue. When you know what you stand for, choices become easier. You no longer negotiate with yourself endlessly. You decide and move on. There is a quiet confidence that develops here. It is not loud or performative. It does not announce itself. It shows up in consistency, calmness, and follow-through. This confidence does not require constant reinforcement. It is built through alignment, repeated over time. As you continue forward, remember this: confirmation is not the reward. It is the responsibility. The reward is what grows from how you handle it. What you build now will reflect not just what you wanted, but who you became while waiting. The next phase will explore how momentum is protected, how discipline replaces urgency, and how to avoid sabotaging stability by returning to old patterns when things finally begin to work. One of the greatest risks after confirmation is self-sabotage disguised as caution. When something has finally settled, when the inner decision is no longer pending, the mind often searches for reasons to reopen what has already been resolved. This happens because uncertainty, while uncomfortable, was familiar. Stability feels unfamiliar at first. Many chosen ones lived so long in anticipation that arrival feels strange. They question calm because they learned to associate intensity with progress. But intensity is not alignment. Consistency is. Momentum after confirmation must be protected, not forced. Protection looks like boundaries, routine, and intentional restraint. It means not reacting to every impulse. It means recognizing when anxiety is trying to reassert control by creating urgency where none is required. Urgency after confirmation often leads to mistakes. When something is truly decided, there is room to breathe. Rushing at this stage is usually fear in disguise. Discipline becomes the anchor here. Not rigid discipline, but steady commitment to what you know matters. Discipline replaces motivation because motivation fluctuates. You will not always feel inspired, confident, or energized. That does not mean alignment has faded. It means you are human. Discipline carries you through neutral days, quiet days, and challenging days. It keeps movement alive without emotional dependence. Another common pattern at this stage is revisiting old identities. The mind replays past failures, doubts, or versions of yourself that struggled. This is an attempt to return to familiarity, not truth. You may feel tempted to lower expectations or prepare for disappointment. But confirmation changes the rules. You are no longer operating from potential alone. You are operating from recognition. Letting go of outdated self-images is necessary to avoid shrinking back into previous limitations. Stability can feel vulnerable because it removes excuses. When things were uncertain, hesitation was understandable. Now clarity demands consistency. You can no longer blame timing, circumstances, or lack of approval. This can feel heavy at first, but it is actually freeing. Responsibility clarifies priorities. You know what matters, and you stop wasting energy elsewhere. It is also common to test confirmation unconsciously. People do this by pushing limits, questioning outcomes, or revisiting decisions that were already settled. They want reassurance, but reassurance is not always external. Sometimes it comes from choosing not to reopen what has already been closed. Trust grows when you honor your own decisions without constantly revisiting them. At this stage, silence becomes powerful. You do not need to explain every move. You do not need to announce progress. You do not need validation to continue. Speaking less is not withdrawal. It is focus. Focus protects momentum. Momentum thrives in clarity, not noise. Another important shift is how you respond to setbacks. Setbacks no longer feel like signs that something is wrong. They feel like adjustments. You stop interpreting resistance as rejection. Instead, you see it as refinement. This mindset prevents emotional spirals and keeps you moving forward even when things do not go exactly as planned. Chosen ones often feel pressure to make confirmation visible immediately. They want results that justify the wait. But confirmation does not require proof. Proof emerges over time through consistency. Trying to force visible outcomes too quickly can destabilize what is still solidifying. Some foundations need time to settle before weight is added. Patience here is strategic, not passive. You may also notice a shift in how you relate to effort. Effort becomes intentional rather than compulsive. You stop doing things just to feel productive. You start doing things because they align with your direction. This reduces burnout and increases effectiveness. Less effort produces more impact because it is focused. As momentum stabilizes, your sense of timing improves. You become more aware of when to act and when to wait. This discernment develops through experience, not theory. Each aligned choice reinforces trust in your judgment. Each unnecessary reaction teaches restraint. Over time, this balance becomes natural. There is also an emotional recalibration that happens. Joy becomes quieter, but deeper. Satisfaction replaces excitement. You may miss the adrenaline of anticipation at first, but what replaces it is peace. Peace is often underestimated because it lacks drama, but peace sustains progress longer than excitement ever could. Relationships continue to adjust during this phase. Some people who were present during struggle may not understand stability. They may expect the old version of you. This can create tension. Respond with clarity, not defensiveness. You do not need to convince anyone of your growth. Growth speaks for itself through consistency. Another challenge is resisting the urge to overcorrect. Some people swing from hesitation to overcommitment. Balance is key. Confirmation does not require extremes. It requires steadiness. Small, repeated actions aligned with clarity are more powerful than dramatic moves driven by fear of losing momentum. You may also notice that intuition becomes more refined. It speaks less often, but more clearly. Instead of constant signals, you receive precise guidance. Trusting this quieter guidance is part of maturation. Noise decreases as clarity increases. At this stage, reflection becomes more valuable than reaction. Taking time to assess without judgment helps integrate progress. Reflection prevents repetition. It allows you to adjust course gently rather than abruptly. Momentum protected in this way becomes resilient. It survives distractions. It withstands delays. It adapts to change without collapsing. This is the kind of momentum that builds lasting outcomes, not temporary highs. Confirmation was not the finish line. It was the clearing of the path. How you walk from here determines what the confirmation becomes. Stability is not static. It is movement without chaos. And when you learn to move this way, progress becomes inevitable rather than exhausting. What follows next is not about speed, but about depth. Not about proving, but about embodying. This is where alignment stops being something you think about and becomes something you live. As alignment settles into daily life, something deeper begins to form. Embodiment. This is the stage where understanding turns into habit and clarity turns into character. You no longer have to remind yourself what matters most. Your choices begin to reflect it automatically. This is not because life becomes easier, but because you become more coherent. Your thoughts, values, and actions start moving in the same direction instead of pulling against each other. Embodiment requires patience because it unfolds gradually. You may not notice it day to day, but over time, the difference becomes undeniable. Situations that once confused you now feel straightforward. Decisions that once felt heavy now feel manageable. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of panic. This calm is not passive. It is grounded. It comes from knowing that you can trust yourself to respond appropriately, even when outcomes are uncertain. At this stage, effort becomes less emotional and more intentional. You stop pushing to feel worthy of progress. You work because the work aligns, not because you are afraid of falling behind. Fear-driven effort burns energy quickly. Aligned effort conserves it. This shift is subtle, but transformative. You begin to realize that much of what exhausted you before was not the work itself, but the internal conflict surrounding it. Another important change is how you experience setbacks. They no longer feel personal. When something doesn't move as expected, you don't immediately assume failure. You assess. You adjust. You continue. This emotional resilience is not detachment. It is maturity. You care deeply, but you are no longer destabilized by every fluctuation. Stability becomes internal rather than dependent on circumstances. As embodiment deepens, integrity becomes non-negotiable. This does not mean rigidity. It means you stop making small compromises that erode self-respect. You speak more honestly. You follow through more consistently. You walk away sooner from what feels misaligned. These choices may feel uncomfortable at first, but they create a sense of inner alignment that no external reward can replace. You may also notice that time feels different. Not rushed, not stagnant, but purposeful. You are no longer waiting for life to start, nor are you chasing it. You are participating in it. This participation brings presence. Presence brings clarity. Clarity simplifies decision-making. Life feels less overwhelming because you are no longer carrying unnecessary mental weight. During this phase, solitude often becomes valuable, not because you reject others, but because you need space to integrate. Integration requires quiet. It allows you to notice patterns, refine direction, and recalibrate when needed. Solitude is not isolation when it is chosen intentionally. It becomes a space of consolidation rather than avoidance. Embodiment also reveals where discipline needs strengthening, not as punishment, but as support. Routines that once felt restrictive now feel stabilizing. Structure becomes a container for growth rather than a limitation. You begin to understand that freedom is not the absence of structure, but the presence of self-chosen structure that supports what matters most. Another hallmark of this stage is consistency without force. You show up even when enthusiasm is low. You continue even when recognition is absent. This is where long-term results are built. Consistency does not require intensity. It requires commitment. And commitment, once embodied, feels less like effort and more like identity. As your internal alignment stabilizes, external validation becomes less influential. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not derail you. Feedback becomes information rather than definition. This emotional neutrality allows you to learn faster and adjust more effectively. You are no longer defending an image. You are refining a path. There is also a shift in how you relate to uncertainty. You stop needing everything mapped out. You trust the next step to reveal itself when it's time. This trust is not blind. It is earned through experience. You have seen that clarity arrives when you move with integrity. You no longer freeze, waiting for certainty. You move with awareness and adapt as needed. Embodiment changes how you see progress. Progress is no longer measured by dramatic milestones alone, but by inner consistency. You recognize growth in how you respond, how you recover, how you remain steady under pressure. These changes may not be visible to others immediately, but they shape everything that follows. This phase can feel quiet compared to earlier stages. There is less urgency, less drama, less emotional intensity. Some people misinterpret this as stagnation. It is not. It is consolidation. Roots are strengthening beneath the surface. Foundations are settling. What is being built now is meant to last. As embodiment continues, your sense of direction becomes clearer without becoming rigid. You remain open but not scattered. Focused but not narrow. This balance allows you to respond to opportunities without losing yourself. You choose from alignment rather than impulse. What once required conscious effort now feels natural. This is how alignment becomes lived experience rather than a concept. You are no longer trying to become someone different. You are simply being more fully yourself, without the distortions of fear, urgency, or doubt. This stage prepares you for expansion that is sustainable. Expansion without embodiment collapses. Embodiment creates the capacity to hold what comes next without losing balance. And from this grounded place, growth becomes not only possible, but inevitable. As embodiment stabilizes, the focus naturally shifts from inner regulation to outward expression. This is the phase where what has been integrated internally begins to influence the external world in tangible ways. You do not force visibility. It finds you. You do not chase impact. It emerges through consistency. The way you move, speak, and decide starts to affect others, often without you intending it to. This influence is not performative. It is the result of coherence. People sense when someone is grounded, and that groundedness carries weight. At this stage, discernment becomes sharper. You recognize opportunities not by excitement, but by resonance. Some doors look appealing, but feel misaligned. Others appear ordinary, but carry depth. You learn to trust this subtle distinction. Saying no becomes easier because you understand that every yes is a commitment of energy. You no longer scatter yourself across multiple directions. Focus protects what you are building. You may notice that your standards rise, not out of ego, but out of clarity. You become less tolerant of inconsistency, especially within yourself. This does not make you harsh. It makes you honest. You correct course sooner. You address issues before they grow. This responsiveness prevents unnecessary complications and preserves momentum. Another important shift is how you relate to effort and reward. You stop expecting immediate outcomes for every action. You trust the accumulation process. You understand that what you are building now compounds over time. This long-term perspective reduces frustration and increases patience. You work with intention, knowing that results unfold in layers. As your external life begins to reflect internal alignment, you may encounter new forms of pressure. Expectations increase. Responsibilities expand. This is natural. Growth brings visibility, and visibility brings demand. The key here is not to revert to old patterns of overextension. Boundaries remain essential. Expansion without boundaries leads to depletion. Expansion with boundaries leads to sustainability. You also become more aware of your role in shaping environments. Your presence influences tone. Your decisions set standards. This awareness can feel heavy at first, but it is actually empowering. You are no longer reacting to circumstances, you are contributing to them consciously. This sense of agency strengthens confidence and reinforces alignment. There may be moments where you are tempted to revert to earlier versions of yourself, especially during stress. Familiar habits resurface. Old doubts whisper. This does not mean regression. It means growth is testing integration. Respond with patience rather than judgment. Reinforcement, not punishment, strengthens embodiment. At this stage, communication evolves. You speak more directly, but with care. You listen more deeply, without absorbing what is not yours. Conversations become clearer because you are no longer speaking from confusion or fear. You are expressing from clarity. This clarity reduces misunderstanding and builds trust. And from that clarity, connection becomes simpler, because what is said now matches what is meant.